Hey guys, what is up? Chris here with Cohesive Friendship Unit. Just me today. I know that this is a plate review. I know probably not a lot of people are that interested in a Pokemon Sword and Shield review when there are already hundreds out there, and it's been months, but this is for the fans of Cohesive Friendship Unit, and maybe some other people will find this a beneficial supplementary opinion on the games. Uh, I wanted to play this game kind of as I always, and I think everyone has always played Pokemon games. They are or were, and still are, a handheld game. They're pocket monsters, right? That's what they were originally called, and that's largely true. This feels like a pick up and play game for, in half an hour on the train, an hour during a lunch break. It doesn't feel exactly like the thing that you sit down and binge for 12 hours. Although it is definitely, there is a time and a place, and I did have binge sessions with this game. I played it in a very similar on-the-go, on-the-move way as I have played every Pokemon game before it, which is part of the reason why it took a while. Also, it's a big game, there's a lot to unravel, and I wanted to completely finish it, dive deep into the end game. Now that the directs come out, this is actually also beneficial, and have some online experience, see how things are balanced, etc., etc. All that being said, we are ready to review the 8th generation of Pokemon games, Pokemon Sword and Shield. There was a lot riding on these games, of course, and because of that, I think it is best to break this up into two pieces. I think we should review this game as a video game, and then we should review this game as a Pokemon game. Let's review this game as if Pokemon has never come out before, and some developer dropped a game called Pokemon Sword and Shield in the year 2019, and we played it, and this is what we think. And then let's consider the fact that Pokemon is one of, if not the biggest franchise on the planet currently, single IP, and consider the game in that context, because I think a lot of the issues with things like Dexgate, etc., comes from one half acknowledging that Pokemon is a ginormous franchise, and another camp acknowledging that it's a video game that doesn't necessarily have to live up to its enormous pedigree. Nonetheless, we're going to break both up. Before we get into everything, we are doing a giveaway at 2,250 subs, copy of Risk Rain 2 on your platform of choice. All you got to do is be subscribed, check out our community tab for more. So if you love us, sub us, and throw this video a like if you found it helpful or if you liked it. And yeah, comment below what you guys think of Sword and Shield. Let's start by talking about this game as a video game in a universe where a Pokemon game has never come out. It's a really solid turn-based RPG. This is, no secret, back in the 90s this was also the case, but the idea of collecting these Pokemon, and in this case over 400 Pokemon, with many new, but again we're pretending that they're all new, collecting these creatures, leveling them up, and strategically using the type advantage is really cool. This is something that a 5-year-old can understand, where grass beats water, water beats fire, and fire beats grass, and something that a 20-some-odd-year-old software developer can also dig into the weird math and learn about the EV, IV type stuff, that the hidden numbers that you don't necessarily see or care about or need to care about. You can get into breeding, you can get into shiny hunting. There really is basically as much depth as you want there to be, and there's a happy place for every level of intensity you want in between. You can become a master breeder, you can become someone who learns what all the abilities do, or you could not learn what an ability is at all. You can learn how to pair held items really well, or you can never give your Pokemon a held item and still succeed in this game, and that is really cool. And I actually was originally going to bash the difficulty of this game. We're going to talk about the difficulty a little bit later in the Pokemon game section. I was going to bash it because at least the first big chunk of the game, it is very easy, but I actually found that the difficulty scaled fairly well. It's hard to say if they actually make the AI better as time goes on, or if they just give better moves and only good moves instead of having Pokemon growl at you 100 times in a row. But I did think that the difficulty scaled very well, and by the time that you get to that quintessential end battle, that trainer is not too shabby, and the Pokemon are also not too shabby. I was impressed in an age where everyone complains about how easy Pokemon is, especially in the last few gens that I've personally played. But again, we'll get into all that. This is a solid 25-hour adventure. It took me just under 25 hours to get through the base story. Again, you could dive in indefinitely on the number of hours you play with a really bad story. You're not playing this one for the story. This ain't no Dragon Quest XI. I really cannot fathom the IQ of the average Galar citizen, how you couldn't figure out these mysteries that were literally littered all over the world and laying right in front of you. And the story is bad, and it's hardly even a story. Actually, I'm a little confused about the end conflict. It's unclear, and it's not unclear what's going on. It's unclear why things are going on the way that they are, and honestly, it's unclear why the story was written the way it was. It's a very weird message. The message that they're trying to deliver is incredibly clear, but the way that they're telling the story is like very head-scratching and very strange. Regardless, it seems like the game lost a decent bit of its creative steam toward the end. That, or they ran out of time. For example, there are late game towns where you can barely go into any structures, and gyms in the earlier ones seem to have a pretty decent, albeit kind of lame, diversity of minigames you play before you hit the gym leader. In this, towards the last, like, I want to say 3 or 4, you're basically just doing battles with very little actual additive stuff, and that's a bummer. And performance is really bad. It's extremely framey. Graphics don't look that great, but I mean, the frame rate is a problem both in battle and outside of battle. It's especially bad in the wild area, and the resolution also leaves quite a bit to be desired. Again, if you could have watched the Digital Foundry video since November on this, but I guess me, a normal human who doesn't have crazy software and the most in-depth understanding of graphics, could still tell, yeah, this is not boding well, and that's coming from someone who thinks Breath of the Wild runs totally fine. So yeah, performance was rough, but ultimately I had a good time. It was fun. I didn't I was hooked. I was always thinking about what I had to do next, even when I wasn't playing. Like I said, this was kind of my pick up and play game, so I would always have like a main game in the background that I was working on. But whenever I was out and about, I could boot up my Switch and play Pokemon, and I was always thinking about Pokemon, even when I was doing other things. This is a fun game. That being said, you're not playing this for the story, and it's not a looker. But let's talk about this game as a Pokemon game. And considering the fact that, like we said, Pokemon is one of the biggest intellectual properties in the world, and there could theoretically be damn near unlimited amounts of money thrown onto it. Look at how many copies it has sold so far. This makes a insane amount of money, and it's a little bit surprising how little has changed since the 3DS days. Let's go back to the visuals / performance. Like I said, this game is not a looker. This feels like my best description of how this game looks is that it feels like what the 3DS 2 would look like instead of the Nintendo Switch. So in a world where the Wii U sequel was like the Wii 3, and it was, you know, on par with like a PS4 or something, and the 3DS had a sequel, the 3DS2. This feels much more like what would be on the 3DS2 than what would be on the Wii 3. And I'm going to show you just I know technology changes at different paces and we are where we are and there's art styles to consider, but I'm going to show you Pokemon Blue, the original Gen 1 game on the Game Boy, which was a handheld game. And then I'm going to show you Pokemon Stadium on the Nintendo 64, which came out at about the same time on the companion console, the home console to the portable console. And this was a big deal to get 3D Pokemon, but I'm just going to show you comparison shots of handheld to home console. And next, I'm going to show you Gen 3 Pokemon on the Game Boy Advance, and I'm going to show you Pokemon Colosseum on the GameCube, which is not even a mainline Pokemon game. It's not a proper generation. So I guess here's my point. It could have looked a lot better. I don't think that this game looks a whole lot different from Pokemon Colosseum. It could have looked a lot better. This doesn't feel like a full-blown console game to me. Again, is that the worst thing in the world? No. And graphics aren't everything, especially in these JRPG-ish games, but it is what it is. That being said, I am reasonably happy with how the Pokemon look. I don't think that they look bad. They don't look good, but they don't look bad, I guess is where I'll leave it. And what was kind of alarming to me was this kind of started to be big in Gen 6 when you had the, quote, 3D Pokemon games. There were rendered backgrounds in a lot of scenarios, and that kind of carries on here. Like if you're battling on a certain route, there will be a bridge in the background that reflects what you're doing in the overworld, but not all battles have rendered backgrounds, and that's weird to me. Like if you fight someone in a gym, but not in the actual stadium, in the gym part of the gym where you're doing the challenge, or you're fighting Team Yell, or you're fighting in like a town or a hotel or whatever, the backgrounds are just white, and it feels unpolished and finished. Speaking of things that feel unpolished or finished, it's 2020 and the sound/voice acting is what? So there are scenes in this game where there are characters singing and nothing is coming out of their mouth. There are scenes in this game where people are talking quite frequently actually, and nothing is coming out of their mouth. This game is making a point to take place in the UK. It's not some made-up accent. The accent is very well known. You could hire British voice actors who have great British accents to act in this game, and it would sound and be fine. It's not even like an issue of like a fantasy accent or whatever. It wouldn't be the same problem as Zelda, I guess is what I'm saying, even if it was bad voice acting. But what's even weirder, I understand if you don't want to voice act in your game, especially Nintendo, they do that all the time. There's not even like weird Simlish, like they don't even like do weird sim talking or Animal Crossing, or usually in games now, if you don't have a voice protagonist or like a Banjo-Kazooie talk, there's at least some like noise coming out of them, and it's just like really weird to watch their mouths move like hauntingly, but nothing comes out. It's weird. I don't like it. Also, I liked the music, but I wasn't a fan of it. It felt rough. I wish it was like really properly orchestrated and better, I guess is the best way I can describe it. I liked the tracks. I didn't like how they were presented. Also, I think we're at a point, I know that there's so many Pokemon, but I wish there was more diversity in the sounds that they make. Especially because I do think that the moves have really good sound to them. Like Hyper Beam, that's a sound that's been around since Gen 1. Psychic, also a sound that's been around since Gen 1 that now sounds really good. And that essence still carries over. I wish they had a bit more sound diversity for the Pokemon themselves. And this is the big part. They were so close to greatness, in my opinion, to truly making this a next gen home console Pokemon experience. there's 3 ways that they were so close but then just fell short. The first is the open structure. Now, this map is alarmingly linear if you actually look at it. And I think I'm not like breaking ground here. Everyone acknowledges that. I was actually okay with how linear it was, but if you look at how the map goes, basically you go to the first city after the wild area, and you're at the 3rd gym, and they tell you, come back here once you have the first 2 badges, fight the 3rd gym. And you go in a literal circle, and then you fight the 3rd gym, you get your 3rd badge. Then you go to Hammerlock, and you do the same thing. You get to the 8th gym, and they say, okay, come back when you have 7 badges. So then you go on an adventure, and you get 4 badges. This was the perfect opportunity for them to have you, when you get to that first place, for 3 badges. And it feels like they almost did this and then backed out at the last minute. When you get to the first area, and they said get the first 2 badges and fight the 3rd gym, it's like a mini section. You should have been able to go in that loop in whatever way you wanted. You should have been able to go left and go to the grass, or go right and go to the water town. And that would have been fine. They could have scaled the levels or done whatever, and then you come back for the 3rd gym. And then when you go to the next area, Hammerlock, they should have said, okay, this is not quite a circle, but come back here when you have the other 4 badges that you need to get. And that just would have been really refreshing and nice, and something that they haven't done since Gen 1, but they could have definitely done, and it seems like it was set up perfectly for, and they just didn't do it, which is what it is, I guess. The next is the wild area. I think this has long been awaited, and it's here, and that's nice, and I guess we needed 2 sticks to do it or whatever, but we can finally rotate the camera in a Pokemon game for one area that is fairly small, and it's too small, and it performs really poorly, and I'm personally disappointed in the late level areas, and it feels really archaic when you spend a lot of time in the wild area and then you move out of it. It feels like jarring. You're like, oh, I'm back in the past again. So it is a good idea, but it doesn't perform up to par. It's really ugly. There's almost always rain or hail or something obscuring your view. And I want to readdress the balance issue. I like the idea of a wild area where you can be let go and go do whatever you want. But my friend, my coworker, actually got this game, and they said, yeah, I went to the wild area, and you can just catch a high-level Pokemon, beat the gym, go back, catch the next highest you can, beat the next gym, go back. And he said he beat the entire game in 6 hours. Again, that's what he said. I didn't fact check it or anything. So I made a point to kind of avoid the wild area, to avoid over-leveling or catching too powerful of Pokemon. So I do think that balance is something that they could work on. And the last thing I want to talk about is Dexgate. This is the biggest franchise in the world, and it's been proven that a lot of those models are in fact identical. I think they could have had the full Pokedex. That's just me. Again, I would have been fine if they launched with the 400 or whatever, but with the promise that the rest are coming. That would have been, I don't know. It is what it is, but let's remember how much sales and money and everything that this franchise is able to churn out. So yeah, I think Dexgate didn't have to be a thing, but it's hard to tell if the disappointment derives from it actually happening or the way Nintendo delivered and continued to let us down in giving us updates and news on Dexgate. But ultimately, I did have fun with Pokemon Sword and Shield. I do think it's a good game, and I do think it's worth playing, and I do think it's a worthy Pokemon generation, but I do think they could do much, much better, all things considered. It seems like we roughly know where things are going to go now that the DLC has been announced for Pokemon Sword and Shield. It seems like we know what Gen 9 and maybe even a bit of Gen 10, depending on if that makes it into the Switch or not. We kind of know what's going to happen. We're going to be getting basically, it seems like we're either going to be getting one big wild area or a bunch of segmented wild areas, but it seems like wild area all the way is the way things are going to be moving, just based off the DLC, which is a very good move. I hope they can get the performance up to snuff. And it seems like the National Dex is also going to be fair game. Gen 9, considering they're adding hundreds of Pokemon in the DLC for this gen, we'll already be pretty damn close to hitting the National Dex at that point. So it seems like at least two of my issues are addressed. Hopefully they can open up the structure. There's always room for improvement on Pokemon. It's half out of love, half out of disappointment. Again, I did really enjoy this game, and I think it's a great game. Having fun making teams and diving into the competitive side with my friends, and hopefully things expand a bit more and they get a bit more ambitious, but I doubt it. But that has been the Pokemon Sword and Shield review on Cohesive Friendship Unit. That's all from me, and I will catch you next time.